last year, obviously, the 49ers did not rush their rookie quarterback, who they traded up to number 3 to get into the fray. They stuck with the guy who took them to Super Bowl 54 and almost won it. Now, after a strange turn of events that no one saw coming, including 49ers coach Kyle Shanahan, the guy who was supposed to be out in Jimmy Garoppolo is back. And here's some of Kyle Shanahan from a lengthy press conference yesterday explaining some of the dynamics regarding the idea of Jimmy being out and now suddenly Jimmy being back as the backup to Trey Lance.
I think that was because the chances were, to me, it seemed slim to none, just with the possibility of that happening. I mean, I told Jimmy came in here the first week of training camp, like I told you guys we would talk. I mean, we talked regularly because he was up here. He wasn't in meetings or practice. But I remember the first week of training camp, me saying to Jimmy, like, hey, if you don't like any of these opportunities, if you don't go to the place you want, you can't get the contract that you want, like, we would love to have you here as a backup in a backup role in that deal. But I want you to know that we feel that way. But I also think there's no way you're not going to get something as this goes throughout training camp. And Jimmy agreed with that. And so we waited throughout all of training camp. And then as we realized I think as he saw the other situations out there, and I think to me it seems like everyone was just waiting for us to cut him before that, so they could see how much they could get him for. But once the last Saturday preseason game happened and no one got injured, then Jimmy thought this was his best situation that he liked. And that's why we were so pumped, because it's obviously a better situation for the Niners. We love getting Jimmy back, but to have him there earlier in camp wasn't an option. I mean, we're going to put him out there in practice for his sake and for our sake. I mean, he was on a $24 million contract and he was going to go somewhere else. But none of that came into fruition, and which we would have ended up having to let him go under that current deal. That wasn't an option. But we were always clear to Jimmy that him salary cap wise and stuff in a backup role and supporting Trey in that. And if that worked for him, that was a no brainer for us. We just didn't think the chances of that were going to happen. And it ended up being that way. And so when it was all said and done, even though it was pretty shocking to us, we thought it was a win-win for both sides.
And it is a win-win for both sides. We talked about that yesterday. Chris, as I listen to Kyle Shanahan explain that, I really am flipping back and forth between thinking that this was something that just kind of popped up out of thin air as they got to the 11th hour of the process and closed in on the moment where Jimmy Garoppolo's $25.62 million salary, when you include the 17th game check, would have become, as a practical matter, guaranteed, or whether they did plan it. I feel like somebody in that organization was smart enough to game this out and say, okay, here's what we're doing. Number one, we're going to wait for somebody to get injured because that's going to open the door for someone to give us what we want for this guy. Number two, we're not going to let him practice because if he would suffer an injury that would end his season, we owe him his salary if he's on injured reserve all year long, so we're not going to let him practice. And then number three, if no quarterback suffers a season-ending injury that results in someone giving us what we want for this guy and also offering Jimmy Garoppolo the kind of contract he would take, then maybe we go to him with a proposal. We have to figure out how to do it the right way. You know, they know Jimmy. They've had him around for 5 years. We need to figure out how to raise this with him. How do we raise it? How do we approach him? How do we make it look like it's something that just, hey, you know, we were thinking? I mean, we'd be naive, Chris, to think that the 49ers didn't, as they sat down and came up with a Jimmy Garoppolo strategy, at some point cross that bridge of no one wants to trade for him, no one suffered a season-ending injury to a quarterback, 24.2, actually $25.62 million about to become guaranteed. What is our plan C other than just cut the guy and let him walk away? I kind of think somebody had this plan in place, and I think at some point after they got, if not just before they got to camp, they knew how this would go if a trade partner didn't emerge.
Yeah, well, you know who it is. You know who it is. Go ahead, give him credit. Go ahead. You know, you've written some snarky headlines about him, some annoying titles that he's talked about.
Do you think Kyle concocted this?
100%.
Someone like Parag Marathe came up with it, who's kind of the genius behind the scenes in San Francisco.
I know he's smart, and he is a huge, important part of that organization, and I'm sure Kyle's had conversations with him and John Lynch, but I just... again, I'm not trying to I just know this human being. He's thought out. He's smart. He's made mistakes. Sure, we know that, and maybe bungled a few situations as far as we can all speculate about the draft, maybe, and all that. But at the same time, it's all he thinks about. It's all he does. I mean, it consumes him 24/7. And he's always thinking of plans and thinking what's down the road. I've been with him for a long, long time and seen how his mind works in life, let alone in football. So I think this was definitely on the radar, like you were talking about. And they knew, okay, in training camp, we're going to be smart. We're going to, he's going to practice and get ready. We're not going to let him play or get hurt and have to owe him the $25 million. If we get a trade we like, boom, we go. And then I think organically as it goes, they start to go, well, okay, Trey Lance isn't doing that good. No one's getting hurt. I mean, what's so bad? Jimmy G is a backup quarterback. That's great. Yeah, he might be breathing down, Trey Lance's neck a little bit, but to what you said, so what? If you can't deal with that pressure, then you can't play quarterback in the NFL anyways. So I think it was thought out and then just organically happened. And that's where, again, I know you've thrown around Shanahan could maybe be the next Belichick. He's that type of thinker. There's no question in my mind. And you know me, I'm friends with other coaches in football. I wouldn't just throw that out there about any of my friends. It's something I kind of believe about the guy here. He's a football wizard. He grew up in the business. His dad was a wizard. So that, and then I think the other thing that's key to this that we got to give him credit for here, because we've gotten on him for other things that he's made mistakes about, is just the lines of communication. The fact that he could keep this situation, two major blow-up situations that happen all the time in the NFL, no matter who you are, but to keep the Deebo Samuel thing good and, whoa, it didn't really ever get too horrible, even though the guy said he was never coming back, and then to have Jimmy G, the guy, like you said, in the Super Bowl, NFC Championship game, throw him by the wayside, but yet still keep him there and keep the lines of communication going, honesty, this is where we're at, all of that. And now they're back together. To me, that's key as well. So that's where I'm going to give Kyle Shanahan a lot of credit for the fact of his honesty, his people skills once again. And I do think that this was on the radar if the right steps happen, like you're talking about, no trade partner, blah, blah, blah. This happens. Whoa, we don't like the way Lance is looking. All right. Well, if Jimmy's willing to take a pay cut, then we'll keep him here. And it just happened to work that way, it is really crazy when you think about it.
And I think the genius of it is, and you hear a lot of times people talk about EI, not IQ, emotional intelligence, more important than your intelligence quotients, the idea that you know how to interact with people the right way. And I think Kyle, that was his frustration when all the stuff was happening with Deebo Samuel. He didn't have an opportunity to talk to him. Deebo wasn't responding to him because Deebo knew once this guy starts talking to him, he's going to talk me into doing whatever he wants me to do.
Right.
And I remember saying early in the offseason, because it played out exactly the way that I feared from Jimmy Garoppolo's perspective, because, hey, Jimmy, if you don't force your way out, this is exactly what's going to happen. They're going to squat on you until it's too late on the calendar. If you get cut, for you to go anywhere else and get a good opportunity and get the kind of money that maybe they would offer you. Hey, Jimmy, we love you. We'd love to keep you around, but we can't pay you 24.2 or 25.62 as the case may be. Here's our best offer, and their best offer is better than what anyone else would give him. What's he going to do? And that's what happened. And the big critique I continue to get from people I know around the league is Jimmy should have brought this to a head sooner. That Jimmy should have rattled the cage, rocked the boat, and forced his way out at the start of camp. He should have shown up and said, here I am, proverbial bells on, ready to go, deal with me. and force them to make a move.
You.
And here's the other thing too.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
look, this doesn't happen very often, but plenty of agents do this. And I apologize if this is going to be regarded as a criticism of Don Yee or Carter Chow. However, one of the most important terms you can have in a long-term contract that covers multiple years, when you get to the out years that have no guarantees in them whatsoever, you put a poop or get off the pot clause in the contract at the start of the league year. A $5 million payment due the third day of the league year. $10 million of the salary becomes guaranteed third day of the league year. Plenty of veteran contracts have that now. If you have that in there, what does it do, Chris? It forces decisions early. Because the way this played out, Jimmy had nowhere else to go, and the 49ers had no compulsion to make a decision based on a deadline. John Lynch said it last week. Deadlines drive action in the NFL. We all know that. You create a deadline in March, so if he is going to be gone, he's gone at a time when he's out there as the teams are making their plans at the position in the offseason. Not in late August when the depth charts are set, although we'll talk about this later in the show. The depth charts are far from set at quarterback for multiple teams.
Right.
But at backup, not at starter.
Yes.
You get out there in March, you got a chance to be someone's starter.
No doubt. Well, this is where it's interesting to me. Again, first off, he took some of his leverage away by getting shoulder surgery. So that ruined it right there, right? So that was his own doing. He couldn't bring anything to a head when you go, wait, no, I'm going to get shoulder surgery. He could have done that if he opted to kind of wait it out and then, played hard ball. And we know that there was teams kind of interested at that point, calling, talking, blah, blah, blah. So when he did that, I think that ruined everything as far as off-season movement. And then when you get to training camp, I don't think he was 100%. It didn't sound like it. So he probably wasn't willing to go like, wait, I want out of here and want to go somewhere and start off somewhere new and not really be able to, do anything for 3 weeks and go there. I think he was, hey, I'm going to buy my time. And I think when you couple that with the fact that at the start of training camp, Mike, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, Jimmy's, as far as football is concerned, he's been with New England and the 49ers. Damn, he's been with some smart guys. I think he probably was looking at it going, well, wait, what do I want to force my hand to here early in training camp? What's worth forcing my hand to go to? What place is there that I go, whoa, I want to force my hand because I want to get there? So that never came about. And then the trade and the injuries, that never came about either. So it's kind of odd how it played out. And I think your point is 100% on with what you were talking about with other league people. But I think Jimmy's camp himself, or Jimmy, when he took back, I guess, the power to a degree as far as away from the 49ers to not be able to just to trade him anywhere with the shoulder surgery. But he also took his own power away to be able to make a power play and go, wait, final decision right now. I want to be traded before this date, blah, blah, blah. And, of course, that didn't happen. So that's where it's really amazing the timeline of events and the fact that we've gotten to this point where we're at right now.
Apparently there was an item in The Athletic yesterday that reported but then revised and removed the idea that Jimmy Garoppolo deliberately had shoulder surgery when he did to prevent a trade. And it's good that they took that out because that really is an asinine thought. He had power at that time because they weren't going to trade him. We talked about this yesterday. No trade clause is meaningless. You're not going to trade Jimmy Garoppolo to a place he doesn't want to go. And if I'm Jimmy Garoppolo and they're going to trade me to a team that is going to take on the last year of my contract at $25.62 million. I mean, they're not going to come to me and squeeze me in August to take less money once they've given up real value for the last year of my contract. Or they're going to give me a new contract on the way through the door that makes me happy.
Right.
So he didn't need to have shoulder surgery at a strategic time on the calendar to have power to prevent a trade. He had all the power he needed to prevent a trade. And this idea that if that's even true and it slows down his preparedness for training camp and all that, that's if that's true, then he's just dumb.
Well,
or his agents are dumb.
Well, yeah.
Because they didn't need a surgery to keep a trade from happening. All they had to say is, I'm not touching the last year of my contract. You owe me $25.62 million if you trade for him.
Or like we've said during the week, every quarterback basically has a no trade clause and just goes, I'm not playing for that team. I mean, and then they're going to go, well, okay, I guess we don't really want you. I think, I included, I thought, well, maybe he is making a power play here because he felt like he was about to get traded to some team, and but you're right, it doesn't really make sense. And I think the fact too that the 49ers kind of let us in a little bit, that like it caught them by surprise. I even fell in the trap. Wait, is he making a power play here with this type of decision? But you're right, it makes no sense that he would have done that. And you got to put yourself in player's shoes too, right, Mike? Where he's going to go, wait, I don't want to get traded and then get there and go, hey, guys, actually, my shoulder hurts. I need to get surgery. That's just a crappy way to start your relationship with a new team. And no player wants to be under that pressure like that. It just makes you uncomfortable. So, I think I even went down that wrong road a little bit at first when I heard about the surgery in the offseason.
I will say this, though, and this is a thought that just kind of popped into my brain as we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
Let's get back to something else we've said about Jimmy Garoppolo. He has that George McFly quality where he's not very good at confrontation. So the surgery prevented him from ever being in the middle of this potentially acrimonious, no, I'm not reducing my contract. Oh, come on, Jimmy. Oh, come on. Come on, Jimmy. Work with us here. He doesn't get pushed by someone. They don't have his Jimmy is a nice guy nature available to use against him if you just go get the surgery. Then you never have to stand firm in these awkward discussions. And I feel like that really is part of his personality, and I feel like the 49ers have used it against him. Jimmy's a nice guy. Jimmy doesn't rock the boat. Jimmy doesn't like getting into these hostile conversations. Jimmy doesn't like to stand up for himself in these settings. I think that's all part of it. So the surgery in a roundabout way saved him from having to be an ass. He didn't want to be an ass. He should have been. He needs agents to tell him when it's time to be an ass, because sometimes, you know what, folks, in all walks of life and all businesses, you got to be an ass.
Yeah.
You got to be a little bit of an ass to get what you want.
Yeah.
And I don't think Jimmy was inclined to do it. So the surgery was his passive-aggressive way of being an ass.
Yeah, I don't
possibly.
You're right. I don't disagree with that thought. You're right. I mean, I don't. I mean, he may, again, it's something I think inevitably he had to get done, and he went, okay, why not do it right now so I can kind of maybe evaluate things around the NFL, and I'm not rushed into making some decision right off the bat. The season just ended. They want to trade me here. Like, okay, now you get to sit back. Yeah, get healthy, trying to evaluate rosters and plan your next move. And, unfortunately for him, it never came about as far as the team, the right situation, or anything like that. But I think he's in the perfect spot. And a perfect spot for him for how everything shook out. And I think for the team itself, it's amazing that they got this insurance policy behind Trey Lance, because they let go of Nate Sudfeld. That tells you right away. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, wow, he's so good too, we want to keep him as a number 3. It tells you they weren't even all that confident in him. If he was that good, they would have found a way to keep him on the roster too and go, well, hey, Jimmy will be out of here next year. We like Nate Sudfeld a lot. He'll be the backup. So they didn't. One, it covers the backup situation. 2, it covers the quarterback situation, the starter, if things are shaky. Or, again, I'm not trying to put a hex on anybody, but the guy played in 2 games last year and got hurt both times. Like, significant hurt. Not like, oh, he just got a little banged up. Like, whoa. And
got hurt in the preseason,
got hurt in the preseason, too. So, like, to the point where, the game against the Cardinals, the knee's hurt, and he couldn't practice for a few weeks. Plays against the Texans, hurts his hand, couldn't really throw for a few weeks the right way. So, that is where, the careful planning, the communication by Shanahan, sure, maybe a little luck or missed moves by, Garoppolo helped out, whatever else. But I do give Kyle a lot of credit, and I think it's put their team in a much stronger position than it would be if Jimmy G was not there.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.